Open the podcast bay doors, Hal.
And welcome to episode 8 of Welcome to Geektown. I'm your host, Kurt Onstead, and I've been a proud geek all my life, being into role-playing games, board games, sci-fi, fantasy, and especially superheroes and comics. And I want to help others join me in those pursuits. But I've found that sometimes people can get overwhelmed or feel left out because they don't have what some would consider to be the requisite knowledge to be considered a fan. And that's where Welcome to Geektown comes in. Here you can ask your questions without feeling like a gatekeeper is calling you out for not being fully versed in every aspect of your new interest. This week, we have a question from Joel L. He wants to know, are there any particularly good comics in which breaking the fourth wall happens? Specific storylines I should seek out or something like that. That's a fun question, Joel, as fourth wall breaking is one of my favorite storytelling devices. Before we get into specifics, though, let's be sure we're all on the same page and define how one breaks the fourth wall. The term breaking the fourth wall comes from the theater. When you're watching a play, especially one set indoors, the set often consists of 3 walls, one in the back and one on each side. Now, if the building portrayed on stage were real, there would be a 4th wall between the actors on stage and the audience. Usually, the characters will act like that 4th wall exists. However, anytime the actors, or more to the point their characters, acknowledge the audience and speak directly to them, that is what we call breaking the 4th wall. While the term started in the theater, this storytelling device can be used in all sorts of mediums, from movies and TV to books and comic books. As long as the character talks to the audience directly, it's considered to be breaking the 4th wall, even in a medium like a novel where there are no sets. For people around my age, one of the more well-known instances of breaking the 4th wall comes from a TV show, Saved by the Bell. Zach Morris would occasionally call "Time out" in the show, and all the characters but him would freeze in place while he talked directly to the audience and contemplated his options. Once he was done, he would call "Time in," and the action would resume as if nothing unusual had happened. More recently, the Deadpool movies have consistently had the main character break the 4th wall. In addition, Deadpool has genre awareness. Not only does Wade talk to the audience, but he also tells us that he knows this is a movie, and is able to anticipate some of the events because he understands the formula movies usually follow. Moving to comic books, let's start with Deadpool, since we've already been talking about him. He's arguably the most popular comic book character to break the 4th wall. In his first few appearances, this was not the case. In fact, even the writer he has been most associated with for much of his existence, Joe Kelly, only had Deadpool break the 4th wall or show genre awareness a couple of times. Most notably when Bullseye shows up and asks him, "How long has it been?" And Deadpool replies, "Issue 16. Which was the last time Deadpool and Bullseye had been seen in a comic together. When Joe Kelly left the book, writer Christopher Priest took over, and he's the one who turned this trope up to 11. Unfortunately, while Priest's writing is often critically acclaimed, that doesn't always translate into sales. In Priest's first issue writing Deadpool, issue 34 of Volume 1, Wade has a dream where he is in hell with all the other characters Priest wrote whose books were canceled. When Deadpool wakes up from this dream, he reveals he knows that there is a man at a typewriter. This is all his twisted imagination. While Deadpool has been fairly consistent in breaking the fourth wall since then, I would say the Christopher Priest run is one of the best for the sort of humor that fourth wall breaking is often used for. In addition, you get to see Deadpool get the power of Thor, kind of. Deadpool trying to live with roommates Titania and Constrictor, and Deadpool in space! It's a lot of fun. If there's any one Marvel character even better known for breaking the fourth wall than Deadpool, it would be She-Hulk. Similar to Deadpool, when Jennifer Walters, aka She-Hulk, first appeared in 1980, she didn't show any signs of knowing she was in a comic or of talking to the audience. It wasn't until almost a decade later that this kicked in. Writer and artist John Byrne penned less than half of the sensational She-Hulk title that lasted for 60 issues, but he's most associated with the book, and he's the one that introduced Jennifer's knowledge that she's in a comic. Again, the fourth wall breakage is played almost exclusively for laughs, with jokes about the Comics Code Authority, and Jen constantly berating the author or begging for a break from the editor. She even did this when she guest starred in other books during this period, including one of my favorite moments from Damage Control. In that book, She-Hulk is fighting some characters and commenting to the writer of the book while doing so. In the meantime, the property damage is escalating, and one of the characters starts counting. 1, there's 2, 3... She-Hulk throws one of the villains into the building they've been fighting through, and the entire floor collapses in on them. The Damage Control character then notes, "It's what I've always said, break the fourth wall and the entire story falls apart." The sensational She-Hulk ended in 1994 with issue 60, and since then, the character has broken the fourth wall less and less. But during the 5 years that the book lasted, it was one of her defining character traits. A more recent Marvel character who knows she's in a comic book is Gwenpool. First created as a one-off joke for one in a series of covers where Gwen Stacy was put in other characters' costumes, Gwenpool got a backup story in the 2015 Howard the Duck series. From there, she was quickly put into her own book. Gwendolyn, Gwen, Pool, is actually someone from quote-unquote our universe, where the Marvel heroes and villains are fictional characters in comics, TV, and movies. Gwen finds her way into the Marvel universe, and not wanting to be an extra, she goes to a tailor and gets a costume of her own. The tailor, seeing the name Gwen Pool, assumed that Gwen went by the alias Gwenpool, and so made her costume similar to Deadpool's, but pink, because A, Gwen has pink highlights in her hair, and B, the tailor had way too much pink fabric and wanted to use it up. At first, Gwen just assumes that she's in a comic book, and talks to the audience that she believes is there. She also uses comic book tropes to turn things to her advantage. However, as the series continues, she actually develops full comic book awareness, able to use her thought balloon boxes as physical objects, and even break out of the panel into the white space between, in order to move back and forth in time and space. Gwen's book lasted for 25 issues, written and drawn almost exclusively by Christopher Hastings and the Japanese duo known as Gurihuru, respectively. Much of the fourth wall breaking is played for laughs in the book, But there's a surprising amount of drama and pathos as well. I can't recommend this book highly enough. Speaking of drama and pathos, let's move from Marvel to DC, where one of the best known dramatic uses of fourth wall breaking has occurred. Buddy Baker, aka Animal Man, was a little known hero created in 1965 by writer Dave Wood and artist Carmine Infantino. He had the power to take on the abilities of animals, like the flight of a bird or the ability to breathe water like a fish, while still maintaining his human appearance. Between his first appearance and 1987, he only showed up in less than a dozen stories, one of which was Crisis on Infinite Earths, where he was depicted as being part of a team known as the Forgotten Heroes. However, in 1988, this changed. DC tapped a batch of young, mostly British writers to revamp some of their old characters. Alan Moore wrote Swamp Thing, Neil Gaiman created the Sandman using some DC concepts in his mostly original tale, and Scottish writer Grant Morrison took on Animal Man. These books started out taking place in the main DC universe, but tied in less and less as they went on, eventually spinning out into their own imprint called Vertigo, but that came years later. Animal Man was originally going to be just a 4-issue miniseries, but was so well received, both critically and commercially, that it was upgraded to an ongoing series. While Buddy has superpowers, he was used more as an everyman figure, reacting to a world full of aliens, superheroes, and other sci-fi tropes, while dealing with relationship issues with his wife and children. But at the same time as dealing with the mundanity of everyday life, the book also gets very strange and existential. The aliens who originally gave Buddy his powers return, being one of the few who are aware of the Crisis on Infinite Earths. They believe a second crisis is coming, and increase Buddy's abilities tremendously. At the same time, one of the other characters aware of the original crisis, a villain named Psycho Pirate, opens a gateway that brings several of the characters removed by the Crisis storyline back into existence. For more information on Crisis and how it affected the DC universe, please go back and check episode 1. Anyways, these storylines come together eventually. Buddy stopping Psycho Pirate and preventing the damage done to the continuity of the world. This leads to Animal Man being transported to a limbo, encountering several unused DC characters before eventually finding a man who becomes known simply as the Writer. It is, in fact, Grant Morrison himself. He explains how Buddy is nothing but a comic book character that Grant has been using as a mouthpiece to promote his political views. At the end of the conversation, Buddy is returned to his regular life with no apparent knowledge of his status as a fictional character. This was Grant's final issue on the book, issue number 26. It's hard to put into words the power of this issue. Seeing a writer interact with his own character and apologize for some of the things he's put them through is a unique experience. If you want some fourth wall breaking but aren't looking for laughs, this is the story for you. Finally, let's move away from the big two and talk about another book written by an author brought up earlier this episode. Christopher Priest, along with his friend and frequent collaborator, M.D. Bright, co-created the characters Quantum and Woody for Valiant Comics in the late 90s. Billed as the world's worst superhero team, Quantum and Woody told the tale of two childhood friends who had grown apart over the years, but were forced back together permanently when caught in an accident that forced them to clang together the pair of armbands that each of them was wearing one of every 24 hours. The book, which had a lot of humor to it, also dealt with serious subjects, especially regarding racial topics. In issue number 4, the book started out with an out-of-continuity piece where the two main characters break the fourth wall and explain to the audience that the issue was going to be talking about the N-word. However, to avoid both using the word itself, as well as the aforestated euphemism, that word throughout the book would be replaced with the word noogie. That's the only outright fourth wall break throughout the 22-issue run by the original creative team. However, the use of noogie and other replacements for inappropriate language continued into later issues with no further explanation. It's not a big part of the book as a whole, but since you asked for good comics where breaking the fourth wall happens, this definitely qualifies. These are a few of the stories that I would suggest for those of you who like some meta in your fiction. Do you have others you'd like to add? Or maybe you have a question you'd like me to answer down the road about comics, sci-fi, fantasy, or gaming. Either way, please send me an email at welcometogeektown@gmail.com. You can also leave a comment directly on the show notes at www.welcometogeektown.com. While you're there, be sure to check the Amazon links to some of the stories we've discussed. Other contact options include facebook.com/welcometogeektown or Twitter @geektownpodcast. In the meantime, don't forget to subscribe and give me a 5-star review over on iTunes to join the Geektown City Council and to help other people find the show so we can all tell them, welcome to Geektown. Population? Us. Welcome to Geektown is written, narrated, edited, and produced by me, Kurt Onstead. Theme music is by Aaron Levitz, logo art by Archie Santana. All other sound clips are the copyrighted material of their respective owners, and no infringement is intended. Falling